Congratulations on the Emmy nomination and a great first season of Dune Prophecy.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm excited not just for myself, I'm blown away and bowled over, but I'm also just excited for the recognition that it brings to the show and also to the more than 1,200 people it took in the art department to bring this to life. So I have an amazing team. I was just saying just a few minutes ago, like, I always say to my producers and to anybody that will listen, like, I'm only as good as my team, right?
Mhm.
Like I might have some ideas and things, but they're enriched and they're made better and they're broadened and they're developed by, the scores of art directors and assistant art directors and illustrators and craftsmen and carpenter. I mean, it's just the craftsmanship on this is amazing, and I think the recognition came, I hope and I believe, because of the depth of what people got to see on screen,
Mhm.
the detail, um, the sets, and kind of the depth of the design, which was executed by all of these people. And that's why, I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to kind of, rah rah and really, cheer for the team as well as
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah, it was an incredible feat. You really, really developed such a vast world of Dune. Going right into it, how do you approach such a vast world of creating like the prequel of Dune? Like, how do you approach like what is the biggest thematic challenge of designing the story that is 10,000 years before Paul Atreides?
All right, so that's a great question. I'll sum it up in a couple of ways. So when I first got called on this, Dune 1 had not come out yet.
Oh,
So when
wow.
when I got the first call, now we
Okay.
hadn't started prep and I hadn't been offered the show, but I got a call, and so it was still a bit of, it hadn't been rebirthed yet in the
Mm,
popular zeitgeist.
okay.
Um, and I think that so what Denny established, and really the only thing that we wanted to kind of fall, because it's both Legendary and HBO, that is
Hmm.
doing this, and Legendary, who does the film with Warner Brothers, is we want to be in the same tonal world. But that's about,
Mm,
that's the connection, because as Denny said, it's a big world for lots of people, but we like the tone. And what he did was he allowed a certain amount of time and depth and kind of beauty to kind of be explored along with a really wild and active science fiction story, right?
hmm.
So that's
Hmm.
one thing. Then I get the show, and the first thing I do is I read the first two trilogies that Brian
Okay.
Herbert
Yeah.
wrote, because
Yeah.
you can't really dive into the Dune world unless you know the canon.
Hmm.
It is
Yeah. And
it
that's
is
canon.
Dune is a foundational work for this kind of stuff, right? Everybody I've seen, George Lucas, I've seen everybody, who refers to Frank Herbert's book, the original Dune and his subsequent books as kind of seminal, kind of inspirational pieces that we all kind of draw from consciously, unconsciously, and
Hmm.
we're super excited. So to actually work on something like this, I think it's important to know. And so I and my researcher, I wrote a little article in Perspectives magazine, which is the Art Directors Guild magazine.
Hmm.
The first person I call is my researcher, and we created this book club, right? And we kind of both sped read through these things, and we would talk every day at the end of the day. Okay, what'd you read? And we had this like two-person book club, because once you have the foundation, I think we went through 5,000 pages of books between the six books of these two trilogies
Yeah.
and the original Dune, which I did tackle as well, just to know where we're going again, because I hadn't read
Hmm.
it since college.
Hmm.
So we sped read this stuff. Okay, now we have a foundation. Now we have the canon. Because what Allison and Diane were doing in the first series, in the first season, was taking this really giant world, and their mission was to try to knit it together into a story that people can watch and that we can understand, in hour increments. Now we had 6 hours to explore and to set this world up. So we had to choose, which planets are we going to? Who is it really going to focus on? We have the Carinos, who are the ruling nobles of the allied planets. We have the Sisterhood, which would become the Bene Gesserits, right? We
Hmm.
have the Harkonnens, and we know who they are. They have a bad past and they have a bad rap sheet, but they're really fascinating. Like, talk about the misunderstood, character.
Hmm.
The Harkonnens are the saddest misunderstood character, who kind
Hmm.
of become our evil, you know, characters, but really through a series of unfortunate events in life and maybe their own inner misgivings. So anyway, so that's the story about the characters. So now we have these characters. Now what the studio and Allison and Diane were telling me in the beginning when we're coming in is they said, okay, Tom, because I came in and I read this and I really latched on to the history of the story. And they said, that's exactly what we want you to explore as a designer. We want this world to not feel like it popped out of the science fiction box where you have glossy science fiction starships and glossy interiors and everything is very new and shiny. We want this world to feel old. I mean, Earth in the Dune books is a character, right? It's the guy,
Hmm.
it's the mother character. And the people in the Dune universe are human beings. They're not aliens that happen to look like human beings. They're humans and they
Hmm.
come from Earth and they kind of populate the universe. And so, Shakespeare is a character, Van Gogh is a character, all these, all of our popular cultures are in there. So what they said is we want a sense of history. We want to look at these sets and we want to feel like they might be 1,000 years old. So I immediately start thinking about like when you go to Rome, right? And you have the
Hmm.
Colosseum there. And across from the Colosseum is the ice cream shop. And next to that's the postcard shop. And then next to that might be a government building. And the
Hmm.
Colosseum might be, there might be hundreds of years between them,
Hmm.
right? Thousands of years
Yeah.
of time. But they all have this kind of diesel tobacco patina over it all. It kind of makes it all look like it's all from the same world. And so it all looks real. And that's kind of what we were aspiring to do, like especially on Seleucus Secundus on the Nobles planet. We wanted to have this sense of history. So when you go in the palace, the
Hmm.
stone, the detail, they're not Corinthian columns, but there are versions. What's a Corinthian column look like
Yeah.
10,000 years from now? What is an architrave or all these architectural terms that are a little more, like molding, crown molding? What does that look like? What does a wainscoting look like? What are these things that, people who watch HGV, look at who know
Yeah.
from their renovation, oh, I get that, but wow, that is so wild and funky. That's a version of it, but it's definitely in the future, but it looks old and it's made out of stone and we can touch it. And the wood is like wood paneling, but wow, that looks like that wood paneling was cut by a laser or a machine or something. There's no way I could do that. So it
Hmm.
has the science fiction twist to common materials. Then on top of that, we want to layer the history from the books. So you see,
Hmm.
like in the throne room, if you look to the left of the throne, there's a statue of Reyna Butler, the warrior, who was one of the great
Hmm.
warriors during the Machine Wars. To the right is her sister, Serena Butler, holding the martyred baby Mannion in her arms. Now, you're not going to see at the bottom of those little plaques that say Reina Butler, Serena Butler, but throughout the palace, the paintings, the statues, the bas-reliefs, all this artwork that's here is all based in the book. The statue of Paul Atreides that is hidden in that is not hidden, but it's on the bas-relief at the top of one of the great halls in the palace. That's there because when the audience sees that, and we don't just have a blank hallway without any detail, but we start to see all these sculptures and all this culture and all this, the tapestry outside of the great salon, which is made, it's completely embroidered. We had it made in India. It's got all
Hmm.
metallic threads and it has all of the kind of flora and fauna that you find
Yeah.
on Seleucus Secundus. There's the Seleucid tiger and the Seleucid boar and
Hmm.
all the sea life and all of that is in there. The audience starts to believe this world, has some depth to it. And you just kind of get lost in that. And also, I think what happens too, because the other thing the studio said is build it real, Tom. I don't want to
Yeah.
see
I mean,
blue
it felt
screen.
real.
I don't want to see CG. I mean, these sets were massive. I've
Yeah.
said I've come from building tentpole productions for feature
Uh-huh.
films. I just done one for Warner Brothers before, and this is as big as any tentpole film you would ever see. The budgets were
Hmm.
as big, the sets were as big or bigger. And actually, when working with visual effects, the idea was to do extensions and top offs, but not to have an actor like myself have a blue screen behind them and just have them floating. Everything had to have a midground and a background and hopefully go up to a certain height. And then they would extend to enrich and build that world and make it bigger. But everything in that palace is real, 360. We
Hmm.
built up 3 stories tall, and then it extends off to do the height and the windows up above. When you go out to the spaceport, those two huge cantilevered ceilings are
Yeah.
real at 80 metric tons of steel. I mean, just crazy. But that also allows the audience, I mean, the actors to step onto these sets and not
Hmm.
go, where am I looking? What am I looking at? Who's there?
Yeah.
Where's the balcony? They actually see it. And so I hope that that actually enriches their performance and lets them get lost in their characters. Because
Hmm.
ultimately, we all kind of do the same thing, whether you're an actor or a designer, we're thinking about the character, right? I'm thinking, how do these characters move around the space? I want them to feel real. I'm not just thinking, is it a blue space or a red space or a big space?
Hmm.
But I think, it's a funny term, people say world builder, but I think we're really framing the story. I think of it as a framer, right? I'm trying to frame
Hmm.
the story. I want this space to feel both expansive and epic, but sometimes if it's just you and I talking, it needs to also be intimate so that it can
Yeah.
hold us. And also not people just get lost or just doesn't start to dissipate into kind of too much blurriness of like grandiosity, right? So it has to
Hmm.
kind of serve both those terms. You can tell by
Um,
my excitement of it that I kind of just get lost in it because it's really fun material and there's so much to
no,
explore.
and you covered so much. I actually have so many expand like points that I want to jump off of that I'm like trying to figure out what I want to go off of first. No, but I think that's what I appreciated the most about the series is that it's a very overwhelming world, but you didn't get lost in it because I think it's because of the practical effect and the fact that the world you actually built the world that it
Yeah,
felt so attainable, that it
thank you.
felt real. And I think this is why Dream Prophecy, this is why prequels are so important because it's so intimate. It's between the people, it's between these families. You bring up sci-fi, and what I really find fascinating about the Dune Prophecy series is that it's a sci-fi. There's developing technologies, but this is a world where technology is almost forbidden. So how
It
did you
is,
approach
right.
an expanding, developing world as a production designer where sci-fi and technology is forbidden in this world?
So that's a great thing. So I what do I basically there's a certain gothic quality to the Dune world, right? The
Yeah.
Harkonnens, there's a gothic quality to the Harkonnen, these kind of misunderstood, kind of, almost devilishly misunderstood, right? They if in the books, it's kind of a series of poor misunderstandings, right? Griffin is
Hmm.
actually a friend of Orion Atreides.
Hmm.
The Harkonnens are actually trying to save the worlds are trying to save a world in the book during the machine wars, and they're accused of cowardice for trying to
Hmm.
actually save billions of lives on a planet because they weren't willing to sacrifice billions of lives to end a war,
Hmm.
to just
Yeah.
end a war. So they're kind of humanist. So there's this gothic quality. So to go specifically back to the design of it, you have to kind of approach it in two worlds. The world that we are in Dune Prophecy is 10,000 years in the future from where we are
Hmm.
today, where you and I are sitting. And it's
Hmm.
10,000 years before Paul Atreides. So we're right in
Hmm.
the middle. So we started to think like 10,000 years from now, you can already see buildings are being 3D printed. 3D printers are everywhere. I'm pretty sure we're not too far away from bricks and mortar being a thing of the past. People aren't going to be stacking bricks and more, when you have 3D printing. So I wanted to kind of start to build a world, whether it be like when you look at the blocks in the Sisterhood, on Wallach 9, all those gray blocks with that kind of repeat pattern.
Hmm.
They serve two purposes. One is they looked really mathematical and machine because they're repeated. And each
Hmm.
one is canted and turned a little bit. They're not all flat. And they become kind of sound tiles, which gives you that kind of vespered quiet solitude of of a seminary or a monastery or a nunnery,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It's an industrial quality too, because in the books, the sisterhood buildings were bequeathed to them by this person, Joseph Import. So they were kind of like leftover buildings that the sisters turned into their school. So we're trying to find a way to kind of have found buildings, have them be machined, and then have them be turned into something that is more personal. And they turn
Hmm.
it into more personal, like in the library. When we first see that huge hall, it's kind of stark, it's a little wider, it's very empty. But then they put the carpet down. They bring in 10-meter high, 30-foot tall bookshelves and books, which are a touchstone in the Dune
Hmm.
universe. That gives you
Yeah.
a sense of history and warmth and age, right? Even though we're deep into the future, the book is still something that we can all relate to. Because if the world becomes too unrelatable, if it becomes too kind of shiny, glossy, new, then the audience kind of feels like I don't really belong here. And so now I'm going to have trouble relating to
Yeah.
these people. And so by having these curios in those bookshelves and all these objet d'art kind of pieces like we have, it gives a way in for the audience to see it, whether it be in the Mother Superior's office, these kind of beautiful glass Rosek globes that hold the kind of sacred water from the planet from where the sisterhood started.
Hmm.
Like I said, there's all these like little details. Like we thought about, nothing was just there because we thought it looked pretty.
Of
Everything that was
course.
created for it
Yeah.
had a story. So it's like Rosek, what's that? That's another planet, right? It was this
Hmm.
jungly planet where the sisterhood started and they were once banished. And this is Wallach 9, where we find them, this barren kind of irradiated planet. That planet has to become their home. And so they have to bring the things into it that create a touchstone that give them kind of access to their past and the audience an entry into their story. So to
Hmm.
go back to, I know I'm spiraling a little bit on detail, but to go back to the story of how you create this world, you have to find this balance between these machined blocks or really
Hmm.
complex geometry, whether it be in the palace, right? Or
Hmm.
the primitivism of Lankavel, where the Harkonnens are on the ice planet,
Hmm.
or the kind of what I would call rudimentary um, kind of wooden huts in Caladan, where the
Hmm.
Atreides are kind of seeking a refuge. Like each of those has to have kind of a machined version or kind of something that feels a little alien, feels a little advanced or progressed from where we are now, but it still is built from stone, wood, earth, right?
Yeah.
The building blocks of a foundation. And we kind of judge like, okay, maybe in the palace on Seleucus Secundus and Zimia, where the capital of the allied planets are, that would have the most advanced. Of course, they're going to have
Yeah.
lasers and printers and
Mhm.
whatever. But now that technology is gone, and what's really lovely is you kind of move through, screens are really minimal. Everything should feel analog, right? It should
Mhm.
feel like an old tube television when the tables turn on. And the thing it feel, everything is on a little, glass crystal file reader or
Mhm.
something, but it should never really feel like they're typing on keyboards and they're doing things. It's almost like an old slideshow when you have to see things. And I think that lends to the actor, to the audience having access to the actors or the characters' minds and their
Yeah.
stories, right?
Mhm.
There's no interface. We don't have to have all this stuff. It really just relies on good old-fashioned acting, right?
Yeah.
And relationships. And that's why
Mhm.
I say there's kind of a gothic kind of primitivism to art science
True.
fiction. It
Mhm.
feels alien, it feels in the future, it feels unfamiliar, but yet common. And
Mhm.
so it feels relatable.
You did a very good job in talking about like the design elements of this and kind of going. You mentioned the Bene Gesserit and talking about their details. There's also this sense of like mysticism
Oh
and
yeah.
what's the better word for it? Have it like culture and spirituality with the Bene Gesserit. So, what are the elements that influence designing their culture and like their world that you drew
Oh,
influence for when it comes to the
absolutely.
Bene Gesserit?
I think like what was clear, like when you read the Frank Herbert books, and I think Brian Herbert carried this through as well, is they really studied cultures from around the world.
Hmm.
And I think, uh, and it's so evident in the books where they're, kind of very direct references. Again, Earth is a character. And so they're pulling from like observational, I guess, elements from different cultures and religions without being kind of specific. They're
Hmm.
getting the essence, the good parts, I think, of how people communicate and how people relate. Um, and the commonalities of like even in religion, without having to be specific, people congregate, they
Hmm.
come together. And I think that's where you get that mysticism or that sense of religious or kind of spiritualism. And so when you come to the sisterhood, in the opening, we see them kind of praying together around that bowl. The Mother Superior honor roll, Raquel honor roll has just died or is in the process of dying in the first episode. And so they're around this bowl and their chants are creating a vibration in the water. Uh, and so that creates a mysticism to it. As
Hmm.
you kind of come into it, their battle language, which they do with their hands, communicating with their hands, uh,
Hmm.
is something which again gives it like a private moment, right? That is clearly you have to be of the community to understand the language. And I
Hmm.
think, and then because we have subtitles, we're let into that language,
Yeah.
right? Because they subtitle it. I
Hmm.
think that's really a beautiful and kind of clever
Hmm.
moment of it. They have their religious books, their Azar, and all these books that feel like religious books. They look
Hmm.
like religious books. They have that kind of commonality. So, where the props are making. And we had all the books made, they were hand bound. We talked about the stitching on the books because we wanted them to feel invested. Like we wanted them to feel of value. And the best way to make something of value is to spend some time considering it, thinking about the
Hmm.
symbology that we put on the cover, to think about the materials that it's made of, and to figure out just even how it's assembled. That's why I go back to the stitching. We had a local bookbinder make, I don't know how many hundreds of these
Wow.
um, books, but I say this because, when we sit down as a team and I am with my supervising art director and my set decorator and my prop master. The thing is that sometimes a set is as big as a football pitch or
Yeah.
bigger or the outer space. And sometimes it's the object in your hand fills the entire screen.
Hmm.
Both have to carry the same amount of weight. Both become equal in importance. The pen or the knife or the book is just as important as the giant set. And so that consideration and that depth has to be considered. And I think, when you approach something like Dune, and I was talking at the beginning, the 1,200 people it took to build this,
Hmm.
Dune elicits an excitement from people because it is foundational. It is a canon work, right? It's the
Hmm.
source material that we all kind of are drawn to in high school and college because it is a cool piece of literature. It's a cool story, but it covers all those elements. And I think, that honestly, that's why I started it in high school, but didn't finish it to college. I thought I
Yeah.
was a pretty introspective and thoughtful kid, but I had to really think about it. It was a little like I just couldn't quite find access to it when I first read it. But then when
Hmm.
I had a little more perspective, and honestly, you go to school, and I was lucky enough to go to university, and I saw, oh, you know what? The the Goya painting I just saw,
Mm.
we just talked about in poli
Yeah.
sci, in Spanish history. So it's like all of a sudden from art history
Yeah.
to poli sci, you start to get those connections and the
Hmm.
lights start to fire and you go, I got it. I see how these
Hmm.
stories connect.
Yeah.
So
I want to say, was there a particular like world or planet or culture that was like particularly challenging, or a set that was particularly challenging to create?
I think I think what was challenging, honestly, Maria, was the scope of what we wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
There was such a desire. Here we are, we're trying to fill up a little over 6 hours of work over these 6 episodes. And the desire to make it feel real that, one of the things that Allison said to me right away, she's like, I really care about those props. I really care about the set deck. I really care about the small things. And I said, good, I do too. She's like, they're going to be big. I'm going to feature those. Right. So we had such a huge number of sets to build. Everything we wanted to be real. We were building them multiple stories high. We're,
Hmm.
we're employing pretty much every set company that we can find and, bringing in wonderful artists from around the world to
Hmm.
contribute to this. Um, and, you've got to do it on a timeline and get it
Sure.
done. So I think that's always the challenge.
Hmm.
But it's what I really love to do. And I think the more you do it, that stuff starts to melt away. And then you just really care about making sure that you're achieving kind of the quality and the fidelity so that, you know, everybody has a home screen that's got
Yeah.
4K or 8K and it's like super high res.
Yeah.
There's no tree to hide behind. And
That's
so,
true.
what was really cool, and I think the other challenge that I would say is like we're doing Dune, there's no location really. You know, we did go to some natural locations that we built big sets within,
Yeah.
but there aren't really there's not an office building that you go, oh, you know what, that looked great, that looked Dune. Because as soon as you walk through the normal doorway with the handle and all, it's really difficult.
Hmm.
We did try to find some odd structures, and we found, I think for the Lankavel planet, we found some beautiful natural basalt caves that we were able to kind of glom onto
Yeah.
and build out and do some temporary structures on top of. But everything required us to kind of really build and kind of expand.
You brought
And it
up
was good.
locations. Sorry, you brought up locations, and I know for the Harkonnen planet because it was a complete ice planet. Were there any iconic locations you were able to film at?
Yeah, so these which Hungary has some amazing terrain, you know,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
and I've had the good fortune to shoot here before, but I'd said to the location department, it's like, I want to see stuff I haven't seen. I want to see the crazy stuff. And I said, don't,
Hmm.
I said, we're doing Dune, so don't worry about how it might fit into the story. If just there's something that tickles you, you haven't seen, bring it to me. And they did. They brought me these basalt caves, and you've seen them I've seen them in Turkey, and I've also seen them in Iran in photos.
Yeah.
Um, they're kind of
I've seen
these
them too. They're
beautiful,
very beautiful in person.
yeah,
They're
and it's like
gorgeous.
it's a soft stone. I've always
Yeah.
wanted to go
Hmm.
there. Uh, and it's basically like a little miniature version of this.
Hmm.
And this had been turned into an art community. And so we went up there, and like I said, they were great. They were kind of stone. They had the right vibe. But if we just went in there, it was a little Fred Flintstone, right? It felt maybe a little too rough. So we had to kind of dune them up, and we made some facades, and we kind of expanded and added stone to them temporarily, of course, you know,
Hmm.
kind of went in. But that's kind of the fun thing, is building on a location. I love that. I
Yeah.
always call it, it's like as a painter, you say that's kind of like gesso on your canvas, right? That's the grit. You know, it's
Uh-huh.
the primer for your canvas. So I've got something to start with, and I can
Hmm.
build onto it and expand on it,
Hmm.
and you can actually get more depth than you would.
Hmm.
And in a way, it dovetails right into the edict and the mandate from the studio and from Allison and Diane to make it feel real, to give it a sense of history.
Yeah.
So, you know, 50% of it's already there, and I'm just adding another 50%. And you can't tell where the real stuff stops and the new stuff
Yeah.
begins, and it all starts
No.
to become layered. And it really kind of, again, mirrors how cities and worlds are built, right? If you go into any city, New York
True.
City, London, it's not all built by one architect in one era. It would all look pretty bland and pretty much the
Hmm.
same. But part of it is
Very true.
buildings are torn down, buildings are put up, buildings are revamped, remodeled, built on top of. They keep the facade and they build some, you know, that whole thing. And that's kind of the approach that we had to building out this world.
Mhm. What were you the most excited for your audience to experience whenever it came to the episodes? If there was one scene that you were the most excited for audiences to
One
experience and the
scene, oh my
design
God,
element.
that's a Sophie's choice. How do I pick one
Yeah.
scene?
You get if there's more than one, that's fine too.
Well, you know what? I think what we worked really hard on, I'll be honest, what we worked really hard on was to have each planet have its own identity, right? Because we're
Hmm.
working in the first series on 4 different planets, and we wanted each one to be really clear and identifiable, because there's a lot of stories, and it's the first, you know, the first season of anything, you're introducing all these characters and all these stories. You're doing the setup, right? And so I didn't want it to be complicated. I wanted to be really clear. So I wanted Zimia, where the palace and all that, you know, that's the most Earth-like, Mediterranean, rich, lush with water. I wanted as much water and fountains and all this everywhere that you could turn.
Yeah.
And then Wallach 9 is an irradiated planet, you know, not too long, you know, just 130 years after it had been bombed by thermonuclear devices. And, you know,
Hmm.
that's a methane, not very pleasant place, right?
Yeah.
Then you had Caladan, which was the forested planet, and that was more like hunting lodge. And then Lankavel, which was our winter whaling planet. So we were able to really, and I was excited to see how each one felt as a whole and as you moved through them. So I think as a piece, like I was really, you know, they just kind of they came together and they expanded and were able to really be um, explored on a really large scale. And I really am grateful to the studio and producers and all in visual effects and everybody to really expand those worlds. So even though we were building these huge sets and making whales and ice cliffs and all this. And yeah, it's a football pitch, but it's nothing to when you boom up and then you can see all the way out to the horizon and really see these huge pieces.
Hmm.
The spaceport was the size of a airport terminal, in
Yeah.
Zimia, to have them come in. And I think like when you see the characters and they come in and you see them get excited, their performance is going to be good. And then
Hmm.
they turn around and it just frames up so beautifully. We did, you know, hundreds and hundreds of, I know we did thousands of keyframe illustrations to illustrate this because it wasn't a world where we could just say, hey, you know what, that coffee shop we scouted and, we're going to
Yeah.
add new tables or chairs and we'll come back in 3 weeks and shoot there. And everybody remembers every place we were going was kind of bespoke, hand built. And so we had to do all these illustrations and really talk about. So everybody knew what it was. We've spent a lot of time on Zooms and in,
Hmm.
conference rooms looking at illustrations on large screens. You can see them behind me, kind of, everything is just kind of keyframed out. And that was really exciting to see it realized and see it really come to a one-to-one finish.
I cannot imagine how many pictures and zooms you would make because you literally built a whole universe. So I can
Yeah, it was
imagine there was a
really
lot.
fun, really fun. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. You do dream about it. You
Yeah.
wake up thinking about it. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of fun too. And I think when you have this many people do it, like I said, it's not one architect. I'm so grateful for all the
Hmm.
artisans that contribute. But what's great is you get ideas coming in, just like a city is, right? It starts to layer up on itself. And I get this wonderful space to be like almost like the conductor of this wonderful orchestra.
Hmm.
And say, oh yeah, I want a little bit more,
Yeah.
brass over here, and I want a little more bass over here. And you
Yeah.
kind of start to find the balance and you start to find the rhythms, um, and kind of framing up these cities and how to tell it.
That's wonderful. What did you hope the audiences would take away from the world you created in the series?
What did I hope? I think I wanted them just to kind of get lost in the world. I wanted them to hopefully get lost in the story.
Hmm.
Because, like I said, where we start this conversation, it was reading all the books, it was reading the stories, it was kind of embedding myself in the canon. And I want, if honestly, it's like, I think Boyana's beautiful costumes and these characters to pop out into this world. It's like, I want them to remember the characters in the story. Really, I want them to kind of like, if they come away and say, oh, that looked great, but I don't remember anything else, I want them to kind of come away really thinking about the story and the space in a way that, is different than most stories they see, that it would
Hmm.
stand out from maybe all the other procedural shows that you see, which I really enjoy as well.
Hmm.
I love a good police show. I love a good,
Yeah.
law show. I love those shows because they're good characters. But ultimately, that's what you're trying to achieve is a good character study and a great story study. And so I wanted the audience to come away and go, wow, that, I don't know, it surprises me. I didn't think about it. It's like to see something new. It's hard to surprise people. It's hard to kind of, we see so much now on our phones
True.
and video and streaming and just the amount that's available to us, the ability to kind of surprise and fancy, you know, their imaginations, I guess. I think that's hopefully what you come away with because that's why we like science fiction. Science fiction
Hmm.
is to be wowed, not just, both in story and scope and to kind of be able to dream about something that I can't imagine. And that's what I really love doing. It's like, when people say, wow, everybody says like when you do science fiction or you're doing design work, it's like the common refrain is, I want to see something I haven't seen before. That's what you hear from the studio. That's what you hear from your producers and your directors. I want to see something I haven't seen before. Of course, you know? So I think to be able to dream up something that you haven't seen before that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I'll say you were very successful with that. I definitely got lost
Uh,
in the world. So I only have one question left. It's going to be a little
sure.
different. I want to ask, what drew you personally to the world of Dune? You said you read the book when you were younger. I have to ask.
Oh,
It made you want to do this project, and
I think it's a touchstone. Like I said, it's canon. It's for me, it's the high altar of science fiction. I see it in so many other pieces that I really love that I won't name, but all the other popular science
I know what you're
fiction
talking. I know what you
stories.
mean.
But it's like, but it's in everything. You know, it's one of
Yeah.
those things that you see it in everything. And so to have this opportunity to come to the source material,
Mhm.
it's kind of like, as a designer, it covers everything that you kind of, you know, it's a dream project. I mean, and you know, I'm not a jaded person on this stuff. I love what I get to do. And if someone says, "Hey, do you want to do one of the iconic foundation materials and design for that?"
Mm.
It's not a question you ask twice.
Yeah.
And you go, "Yes." When, how, what? And I had no idea really, you know, how big it would be, how encompassing it would be, how many years I would end up being on it, which have been a few now. You
Mhm.
don't think about those things when you start. You just think about the material, the opportunity of that story. And it's just like what the viewer is. I don't know where it's going to lead me, but I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty good ride. And so, you know, I guess that goes back to what I want the audience to get out of it. It's the same excitement when I get the call. I still remember it, by the way, Maria. I can tell you, like, I remember where I was when I got the email. I was remember when I, you know, had my first conversation and all the conversations that led up to me being awarded. I even remember, like, after I got awarded and that one moment of like, oh God, what am I going to do? Okay, got to get into it. You know, you
Yeah.
realize what the responsibility you have above and, you know, ahead of you. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like
Well, it really
you
shows
know,
that you love it.
yeah,
And
thank you.
yeah, it translates very well. It was incredible. This was such a joy to talk to you. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Maria.
It was an
It was
incredible
wonderful to
story. Yeah.
speak. I
Yeah.
really,
Thank
like I said when we started, I appreciate the interest
you.
in the story and the world. And I really appreciate the opportunity to, you know, to trumpet the work of the show. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just me, it's really the show that I want to trumpet and all these people and, you know, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. So I'm really
And I'm
humbled by it.
excited to see what you guys do with season two. I cannot wait for season two. I'm so
I
excited
can't
for
say
it.
anything except to say
I understand.
you haven't seen anything yet.